Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar on the secret formula to winning clients. I'm just going to let everyone join onto the webinar because we've got a very popular sign up today of over 150 people. So I'll let people just join the room. But just as ways introductions as people are joining, my name is Alice Weightman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Work Crowd. The Work Crowd is a online platform that connects really talented, the best freelance marketeers to project-based work globally. So we started in the UK, pushed out into Europe, and now we've got a soft launch happening across the UAE and beyond. So it's a really exciting time for the business, and that's why we're particularly delighted to be partnering with National Freelance Day to do this webinar. And obviously, the success of any freelancer's business is driving new revenue into the business, making sure they've got enough clients coming through. So what we thought we would do is to get together part of the Work Crowd team who are very much instrumental in working with freelancers to help them secure projects through the platform. And also a freelancer who's also going out there winning business, has used the Work Crowd platform and actually also supports the Work Crowd on marketing activities. So just as a way of quick introduction, Madeleine Weightman, she is also co-founder of the Work Crowd. Emma Litster is a community manager that very much works hand in hand with freelancers and clients. And Mel is our digital freelance specialist that works across a variety of different businesses. So we'll be able to provide some insights from a freelance perspective. Please do use the functionality and ask lots of questions. We love to make our sessions as interactive as possible. I know many people that are here today have already been on our webinars, but for those that haven't, please do use the Q&A and chat functions, and I'll try and pick up the questions as we go along. So we can put as many questions to the panel as possible. So let's get started. We're going to first of all sort of strip it right back and think about how really you start with freelancing in terms of getting, you're new to freelancing. What's your starting point? Madeleine has many conversations with new freelancers about this. So Madeleine, I'm going to throw this one over to you to start off with, but do you want to give us a bit of insight in terms of that actual sort of starting point to winning new clients?
Absolutely, Alice. So, obviously we get lots of freelancers who come into the Work Crowd, some at sort of quite early stages of their career and others that are later. And I think, a common theme is really thinking about actually first and foremost, what's your USP? And very much thinking about it in terms of those transferable skills. So what's your industry specialism? What are the key skills that you can offer your client? So, clients, unless typically aren't going out there thinking, I want an AM or a account director, unless they're an agency. So if we're thinking about brands themselves, brands have problems and they're looking for solutions to those problems. So you really need to think about what are your core transferable skills and make sure that you communicate in the same language. So whether that be I'm a social media expert, I can help with product launches, I can set up a new event, and then think about the case studies that you've developed over your career to date, and have those as a bank that you can share with your potential clients, as well as getting together a bank of recommendations. So I think that's a really key starting point, is think about your USPs, think about those transferable skills, get a bank of case studies or recommendations that you can share with clients.
Brilliant, absolutely. And with us, we have a community of over 6,000 freelancers. So being able to sort of differentiate yourself and understand what is your service, what is those USPs are really, really fundamental. Now, it must be quite also hard. You're starting out and there's so many different channels now to communicate. You've got LinkedIn, you've got tech platforms, social platforms. Mel, you start out in freelancing. What is the shop window? What channels should you be thinking around? How, where, what? All those different questions. What should the freelancers be doing?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you start as a freelancer, because you're no longer relying on a CV. The CV is kind of not important. You've got to be put yourself out there. You've got to be discoverable for businesses. So there's a wealth of places, you know, starting with building your website, you know, having a portfolio available, and, you know, touching on what Madeleine said about showing your services and what you're available. You're no longer talking about your experience and your job roles. You're talking about what services do you offer, and what results have you got from those services for previous clients, because you're now a business. You're now you've got shoppable services that people want to see. I think that's what's really important. Thinking about when you're first setting up and putting out your kind of shop window, it's like, what am I offering? What have I done before that shows how good I am at doing those things, and kind of putting that out there for people to discover, whether that's a website, your portfolio, whether that's on social media in terms of LinkedIn. You know, again, thinking about the channels of social media. If you're B2B and that's what you're looking at, you need to think about going on LinkedIn. If you're a designer, you know, and you're looking at B2C clients, and actually maybe going on, you know, showing your work case on Instagram is kind of the best place to go. So again, thinking about who it is that you're trying to target as a client, and where are they living online, and how can they discover you? So I see all those kind of things. But then also there's the platforms like the Work Crowd that can really help you be discoverable, and people who are actively and intently searching for freelancers will go on those platforms as well. So as many touch points as you can to begin with, put yourself out there so people can really discover you kind of all over the place, I'd say.
Great.
Yeah, I think just I totally agree with Mel. It's sort of really understanding, you know, where your customer is. So actually, what channels do they use to communicate? And to begin with, actually, you may not know that. So as Mel said, you may be using multiple channels, but actually, once you understand this is where and how my customer likes to communicate, we'll use that channel, make the most of it, really own it and take advantage of it, and actually then that will be making best use of your time.
And time is key. You know, as a freelancer, often the reason why people start freelancing is because they love the job they do, but suddenly, you know, they're doing the job, they're winning the clients, they're doing their own marketing, they're doing their own accounts and HR, and they've got a lot of things to actually do. I was reading an interesting stat that 70% of freelancers now do use job technology, like job boards like the Work Crowd or Upwork or places like that. And actually 77% found that technology was simplifying their life and making it easier. So whether that's finding work or actually helping them with other areas such as bookkeeping and things like that, then do use tech, because, you know, I appreciate freelancers' time is so valuable, and you want to get as many billable hours out rather than admin hours, which aren't billable.
And I think that's one of the things that we certainly, in terms of the feedback that we get from our community members, is that they do really value the fact that, one, they've obviously got a technology solution that sort of centralizes all of that key messaging, job search, payment, but at the same time, they've got a team behind it, like Emma, who they can pick up the phone to. And actually, if they've got a problem or they want to run something past somebody else and bounce something, you know, whether that's how to pitch to the client or is this a good role for me, there's a team there behind the scenes to support them.
Definitely. I'd say as well, you know, on top of using all those social media channels and different profiles, portfolios, etc., to, you know, get yourself out there and your name out there, it's so important to keep these up to date. And it sounds so silly, but you can get to a point where, you know, with freelance being so quick, such a quick moving process, you know, the amount of people that I've spoken to in the past that have said, oh, just give me some time to update this, and I'm like, you haven't got time. You know, even if it's just 5 minutes a week or every few weeks, just to update it with new current, you know, projects, work that you've done, just so it's always there. And you know, that will help people to always be able to see what you're up to, what you're doing, and, you know, some different skills that you might be getting that you haven't had before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think just on that as well, you know, as a freelancer myself, it's hard to do, but you have to get in a process of doing that. And actually, at the end of every project I finish with a client, I will then put that on my portfolio. I will talk through what I did, what the campaign was, and then also what the results were. And if you get into that kind of habit of keep doing that, you know, that kind of shop window always will stay current and always will stay new. And it also kind of gives you content to talk about on your channels. I think I just saw a question on someone asking about what to post on LinkedIn, because they kind of freeze talking about themselves. But actually, you know, you've got to see yourself as a product you're selling. So if you are finishing a project and you're excited and you had great results, talk about that. You know, say, oh, I've just finished this great thing. This is what I did. These are my results. If you want to see more about it, I put like a big case study on my portfolio, and just go have a look at that. And you know, if you can get in that habit, and it is hard, and it's hard to talk about yourself, but if you do get in that habit, it makes it easier in the longer run as well.
Absolutely. And coming from a recruitment background myself, so I'm also a founder of a headhunting business. The one thing clients always ask me when looking for talent is what brands have their person worked on. So being able to talk about that is fundamental, and it's really going to get you out there. So I know, Mel, you just covered about a question on LinkedIn, and it seems relevant now because that is part of your shop window. And the attendee saying sometimes they just freeze about posting stuff on LinkedIn and don't want to come across as overly salesy. Has anyone got any tips on, you know, LinkedIn is your shop window and what someone should be posting to encourage, what would help them? Mel, do you want to sort of add to that?
Yeah, and in my experience, it's each down to your own personally, how you are as a person, how much you can put yourself out there. And you've got to be an organic in how you talk and how you put yourself out. If you're not feeling, confident, that you've got to just do what is in your comfort bounds. But I would actually say, to begin with, shameless self-promotion. I did it. I put a picture of myself out there that had a graphic that said, I'm ready for business. I'm here, hire me. Here's what I've done. And, play with it a little bit, And I even said that to say, shameless self-promotion, just because you have to do it as a freelancer. You actually have to put yourself out there. And I think, again, if you do it in an organic way, and if you talk about the things you've done, and also, get involved in conversations with potential clients on projects they've run, share content from potential businesses who you'd want to work with and saying how interested you are in that project. And just join those conversations, I think, is a kind of the best starting point. Obviously, you don't want to go too far and posting every day, but everyone understands that freelancers need to put themselves out there. And I don't think you should feel ashamed to do that. You're just going to have to go out and do it. But I think talking about things you worked on, talking about projects you find really interesting is a really good starting point, especially on LinkedIn, and just engaging in those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of leads very nicely on to engaging with clients and reaching out to clients, new clients. Mel, obviously, you talked a bit about that, shamelessly putting yourself out there. Any other sort of techniques that you would recommend that have worked for you? Madeleine, do you want to interject on that?
Yes, so we've as the Work Crowd, we have 7,000, I think it's actually over 7,000 freelance members and over 2,500 client members. And over the years, we've looked quite carefully and analysed what works, what doesn't work in terms of that approach. Now, obviously, I'm talking specifically about the Work Crowd, but actually, I think that can be extrapolated across, whether it's actually a referral, whether it's a response to a post that you've seen on LinkedIn, whatever channel that you're using. It's how do you make that initial first approach, what works and what doesn't work. And I think there are some do's and some don'ts. So don't make it too short. Do always personalize it. Don't go into a huge big ramble that someone is going to switch off and fall asleep to. I think the real sort of secret sauce or winning formula is, one, engage. And actually, flattery works a treat. Two, match. So actually think about what's your client put out there. Quite often it can be quite brief, but that brief will be those core words. So match illustrate the relevant experience, the case studies that you have that in that particular area, and then finally close. And when I say close, it might just simply be, would love to have a conversation. This is my number. This is when I'm available. Look forward to hearing from you. But do remember to always put some close follow-up in play. So if you think of it, those 3 short paragraphs, engage, match, close, then I think that's a great way of looking at it.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I think that's really true. I think, you know, as an early on in your freelance career, maybe you do need to just go for a lot of different jobs. But I think in the engaging process of client, if you really know who your client base, who you want them to be, you know, and you are passionate about that industry, or you have experience in that, you know, that initial engagement should be quite authentic, because, you know, you're engaging the company that actually you want to work with. And if you feel like that, then that will probably come across in the way that you reach out to them. And as Madeleine said, flattery, you know, looking into their business, what do you like about it? Like, you know, tell them. People love to hear about themselves and their businesses, you know. That's like a really good way to engage in my experience, what I often do. And I'll always do the research before reaching out to people. But especially as you're a little bit further into your freelance career, really going down the routes of the industries and companies you want to work for, it should be a lot easier to talk to them and engage with them, because that kind of passion should naturally come across.
Absolutely. And I'm going to interject one of the questions here from Sam, who said that she feels totally fatigued, or he perhaps, by reaching out to people via sites like Upwork, where people are sort of like pushing down pricing. I know we're going to talk a bit about pricing, but just to sort of interject, you know, maybe think about where, you know, be targeted as well. Maybe Upwork isn't the platform for you, and maybe find something that is specialist, that doesn't focus on price, but focuses on quality. There are, you know, it's finding the right tech for you. You know, Upwork has been incredibly successful, but probably in a certain category of freelancers. And if value add and high end, it might not be the platform for you, where it's more of a question of price rather than what you're doing.
And I think, just if I can add to that, I think it goes back to what we talked about right at the very beginning, which is really thinking about your USP. So actually, you know, focus on what you're really good at and invest your time in actually reaching clients who match that, who are relevant to that. Now, of course, there are going to be times when you might want to sort of expand your skill set, bring on new clients, and that's going to be a sort of further investment in terms of your time, because a bit like the example that you gave, you might have to spend more time reaching out to clients that and unfortunately getting those knockbacks. So I think then it is a little bit of a case of saying, if you want to branch into a new area, what's going to be a USP there? So perhaps it is price, perhaps it's flexibility, but really then sort of understanding what your clients' problems are and hopefully providing them with the right solution.
Great. I mean, that again leads me very nicely on to really how you stand out in a pitch. We'll come on to the chasing element in a minute, and Louise has asked about that. But standing out in a pitch against competition, you know, what would the key kind of things that you would recommend to do that? Mel, maybe from your experience, and then maybe the Work Crowd team can interject after that.
I think one thing that I always do, and I think I recommend it to people, is in my proposal, is I will always give some sort of valuable advice when I reach out to someone to showcase that I do know what I'm talking about. So for an example, if I'm going to for a PPC campaign pitch, I will go away and do research on their industry, give them stats on the average monthly spend of their competitors. I'll give them the kind of top keywords already for their business and actually what they're looking at for a cost per click around that. That in itself provides a little bit of value to them and kind of shows you do know what you're talking about, and you give them that little teaser into actually this is what I can bring to you as knowledge and as research and that. And I find always trying to interject something like that in my pitch just to kind of it's almost showcasing your work. And as I said before, like being, you know, passionate about the industry and about the client, about their business, and really tailoring your proposal to their industry, to their business, and really getting down to the nitty-gritty of their brief, and, you know, explaining very clearly in your like services what you can offer them through the proposal and the pitch, and matching it to that should be selling yourself in that way. And I think those are kind of two things I always try and do.
So Mel, would you recommend pitching less but with good quality pitches that you feel you're going to win.
Yeah, I mean, again, it does down to experience of where you are in your freelance career. Maybe to start off, you do just have to go for a lot of things if you need to, but if you know, I will spend a long time on my proposals. You know, it's not a quick blanket out to everyone. I will sit down, I'll really sit through briefs, and it's particularly on the Work Crowd where you get, you know, quite a decent brief for a pitch. It's not, you know, like the Work Crowd where it's just like, I'm looking for someone for this. You know, you really understand what they're kind of after, and I'll kind of sit down, I will create a proposal that is, you know, tailored to that, and I will spend a few hours on it. And it is, you know, it's quite a big part of being a freelancer is being able to do that proposal. And I think, you know, taking them through all the different and being quite transparent as well. We might talk about this later, but, you know, I even include my terms of business and everything in that, so they get a complete picture of who I am, how I work, and how we can work together. And I kind of think it's really, you know, you put a lot of effort into that, you know, it should be quite a lot easier to kind of get over the line with them.
Great, thank you for that. Madeleine.
So yeah, I think I absolutely agree with Mel, but I think if I almost take a couple of steps back, I think it's really important to, you know, before you put together that pitch proposal, to actually have some time with the client. So whether that's a phone conversation or various email conversations, to really understand, you know, what are their pain points, what are they looking to actually achieve, what resources, assets do they currently have in-house, and what are they missing, so that actually when you put that pitch proposal together, you're very much giving them a solution with you being the solution. So I think one, that's really important. And then the other would be that actually, you know, going back to that investment in time, you know, as Mel said, actually putting together a pitch, it could take an hour, a couple of hours, longer. So I think really then actually asking the client, one, how many people are involved in this pitch process, getting an understanding of the value of the work that you're doing, so their budget, because of course, you know, if the client's got £100,000 budget, you're going to invest a hell of a lot more time in your pitch proposal than if they've got £1.5 grand budget. So I think those are really important factors. And then I think my final bit of advice is that, of course, getting involved in a pitch, you know, it is your time, and as a freelancer, your time is your livelihood. So just manage the client's expectations around that. So let's say you're pitching for a piece of work, you find out there's quite a lot of people in the pitch proposal, it isn't a huge value project, you might actually manage the client's expectations in terms of what they're getting and what they aren't. And I think Mel talked briefly about giving them a taste of you know, understanding their industry. But at the same time, I think whilst you want to give them a let's say a teaser, you want to show them that you understand their industry, your knowledge or your creativity is your intellectual property. So don't give too much away too soon. There was a freelancer who drew me within our network, who I actually just felt like she had a very good approach. You know, a lot of her competitors were almost creating these huge, wonderful pitch proposals, which was almost like, whoa, slow down, you know, it's too much of investment. And hers were very brief, succinct, but the first stage was actually a discovery phase. So, and that discovery phase was a paid piece of work. It was a half a day to a day's project, spending time with those key stakeholders, understanding the business, and then almost putting together that first phase of the project brief. And I loved her approach, because actually what she did is she turned, for some, the pitch proposal into actually a paid piece of work for her. So that would be my general advice on it.
Great, thank you. Emma.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just going on from Mel and Madeleine, the overarching thing here, I suppose, is, you know, it's all about trust. A client wants, you know, they want a freelancer they can trust, someone that's going to get the work done to the timeframes that they need it done by. So I think, you know, everything that we've talked about comes under that banner. And I'd also say, you know, don't underestimate the small stuff of just, you know, timely responses, being polite, being kind, and, you know, the flattery, but also the honesty side of things. And I think I think as, you know, humans as a whole, you know, we want to say that we can do everything. We don't like to say sometimes, actually, you know, I'm not 100% sure. And I think being honest from the get-go, and it might mean that, yes, that project isn't, you know, completely right for you, but who knows, 6 months down the line. And I think the client you'll stick in their mind then if you've just been honest from, you know, from the start. And yeah, I think it's important as well to remember the small, you know, the small things of just kindness and honesty and politeness. I think will go a long way.
Absolutely.
And that's so true. People, you know, when people work with freelancers, they are working with you as a person, you know, whereas working with an agency, it's a kind of it's a business, it's a service. But actually, like it's so important, you know, you forget that, but actually people are working, people buy from people. And I think as a freelancer, getting your personality across and being, you know, transparent is so important.
Great, good. Well, thank you for all that advice in terms of winning those first initial pieces of business. Key though to business is client retention and actually growing that client. Mel, do you want to perhaps give us a little bit of insight of how you've kept clients, how you've then developed that business? Have they started in a small way and then gone further beyond that point? Yeah,
I mean, like as a freelancer who's nearly been freelance 3 years now, I would say 90% of my work now is through referrals. So that kind of, it's not just about the retention, it's about the nurturing of clients to the point where they will refer you. And you know, if you can get yourself into that way, you know, you're going to have a successful freelance career. And I think the kind of, you know, the main thing I do, and you know, it might not be everyone, but I do try and go a bit above and beyond for my clients. You know, I try and put myself as an integral part of their team. You know, I'm not an employee, I'm a consultant, you know, so I don't sit back and just get told what to do and wait to that. I'll use my initiative to think about things, and we'll have an initial conversation and we'll create a strategy. And if I think of something that is outside of that I think would be great, I will put that forward to them. And you know, it's you know, being proactive and putting yourself in a position where you almost get more work from the same clients because you're suggesting those things. They might come to you just for some social media or just to help you write some copy for a website, but you might then be able to say, actually, I've noticed this and this could help your funnels, or actually, you know, your social media is not getting that great. Maybe if you do some paid, that's going to help you even more. So with me, I always try and do that. I think about, you know, it's not just trying to get more business just for the sake of it, but if you actually are seeing work and you know, if you're actually with a client and you can see things that are going to make them more successful, it's talking about that and trying to do that more. So kind of like how I've often kept clients and retained them is because actually I've become an integral part of their business that I want to, you know, they want to keep me on to do the next thing and to the next thing. And often client projects may come to an end, or sometimes it could end up going on for a year because there's lots more things we can do in working together. And I think, you know, if you do that, there's not just the retaining and the nurturing of the client, it's then you have proved yourself as a person, as someone who they want to work for and who they want to recommend, because they are saying, you know, you've done so much and we're so happy to work for. If someone comes to them and says, oh, do you know anyone who could do this? Hopefully you then come to mind or said, I've worked with a really great freelancer who, you know, they did this and this and that and really stand out to them. Yeah, it's kind of my experience.
Great. Thank you, Madeleine.
Yeah, I think Mel hit the nail on the head when she said, you know, remember you are a consultant, because too often, I think sometimes freelancers, feel that they should have that direction from the client, that, you know, the client says X, Y, Z, and they're there to do, you know, but you've got to step back and say, I'm a consultant, and with that, take control of the situation. So I think some of the things that, you know, really can benefit is regular reporting. You know, do a regular monthly review, for example, with your clients, where you are, what you've achieved, but also where you want to be next. So there is a constant schedule and pipeline of work moving forward. And like Mel said, if you go that little extra above and beyond and actually really add value, that client's going to want to stay and keep working with you.
Absolutely. So, you know, you've run business, you're growing that client business, you're sort of flat out doing that. How do you then keep your pipeline going and decide maybe what projects to pick on? You know, what's your advice in terms of keeping that pipeline ticking over? And have you got any advice that could help the freelancers that you're working with?
Yeah, I suppose one positive of the Work Crowd is that, you know, we do have constant projects coming in, which is great. So we're always able to, you know, have people in mind that we can call up and say, oh, I know your contract's coming to an end. We've got this that, you know, might be suitable for, you know, for a next step. But I think as well, just more generally, it's keeping your eye out for those opportunities. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, even if it's something that you can't help with at the time, but you think, oh, actually, I really like that business, it's worth making that connection and you know, networking with that person so that in the future you can keep in touch and you know, keep that ticking over for something that potentially could come up in, you know, in 6 months time or whatever. So I think it's a big, you know, big push again for networking at this stage, which I know, as you've said, Mel, and keeping profiles updated, it can take time. But I think, you know, if you really look at how much business that might get you in the long run, it's worth putting that time and effort in to, you know, look around for some different freelance opportunities, even if you're in a, you know, 3-month contract, just to see what might come up in the future.
And I think if I can add to that, I find what works really well for a lot of freelancers is one, have some key, let's say they're your core clients, they're your bread and butter clients that you have, you know, hopefully you've nurtured and you've got a long-term relationship with. At the same time, as a freelancer, you're always looking to think ahead, refreshing your skills, moving with the market, and then maybe because new opportunities, new skills you want to develop, and those you can identify perhaps other clients. They might initially be shorter projects where you can perhaps gain those additional skills and experience. So if you're sort of juggling between the two, then hopefully you likewise have a good pipeline of business. And I think just Emma touched on it when she talked about networking. So networking, actually thinking about not just your client network, but actually your freelance network. And collaboration, I think, is something that's really important. You know, as a freelancer, we're not just an island. You know, we do benefit from working and collaborating with other people. And I think one of the things that we've very much seen here at the Work Crowd, a real acceleration of, particularly in 2020, is actually freelancers working and collaborating with each other. And I think there's a huge benefit there. And we have got an event that perhaps Mel can talk more about that's coming up with IPSE. But one of the things that where I think this can work particularly well is, let's say you're a more experienced freelancer. Now, actually, as an experienced freelancer, your client may not have a budget for you to do all of the strategy as well as the delivery. Likewise, if you're a slightly more junior freelancer who's new to freelancing, you may not have the experience to necessarily always win those pitches or put together the strategy. So actually collaborating with freelancers can be a really successful way to innovate, win more work, but also ultimately have happy clients at the end of it.
Great, thank you. We've had quite a few questions around pricing. One actually sort of, you mentioned a little bit about that discovery phase and pitching, but how should people price to be competitive? You know, they might want to get a few bits of business underneath their belt, and should they sort of drop the price to get that? Or are they then suddenly in a price war and it's not the level of quality that they want to go for? But also, you know, suddenly sometimes people are dragged into calls to contribute and they haven't really started and signed the contract. So anything about that sort of upfront in terms of managing clients, getting your pricing right while still being competitive? Madeleine, maybe you could sort of start on that.
So my thoughts with pricing is that, one, time sounds expensive. So if you have a client and you know, you position yourselves, okay, that's 8 days work and my rate is $350, $600, whatever it might be a day, actually time sounds expensive. Going back to what we talked about earlier, if you actually understand your client's pain points, you understand what they're looking to achieve, and you're positioning yourself as a solution, actually give them a solution. So, you know, deliver them, put together a statement of work, which is that I can deliver X, Y, Z. Now, and it is for this price, to manage their expectations in terms of how much of your time they can take as part of that, of course. So, well, okay, this might be 4,000, and 4,000 looks like X many days of my time, but I'm going to spread that out, you know, across the month, 3 months, or whatever it might be. So I always feel that that is a more effective approach. And then I think going back onto the whole, you talked about, do you drop your pricing, etc., etc. Well, one, if you take that approach, no, you don't need to drop your pricing, because actually the client really puts back, you know, will value, if this is their pain point and this is the solution that they've agreed they want, they're going to put value on that. But likewise, I think for, you know, as a freelancer, if you're a more junior freelancer, perhaps within that price point, you've got more time to deliver the work. As a more senior freelancer, actually, you deliver the work within less time. You know, it's a win-win all round. So thinking of it more in terms of a price for a solution, I think is but giving them at the same time an indication of how many days, because otherwise clients can be guilty of thinking that they can call you and phone you and email you, and if they're aware that this is how much that of your time that they have, at least it manages those expectations.
So, and just responding to this in terms of this individual has been requested to have some meetings as a discovery phase, and they've already had a couple of calls and they feel awkward about charging. I think it's being upfront and saying, I charge this for my discovery phase. Factor that into your proposal. And if you're feeling awkward about it now, drop them a note saying, would love to do the discovery phase. This is how much it will cost. So the client also knows that you're in control and they can't push you around. Otherwise they'll just, that will be your relationship going forward. You need to set the scene.
Definitely, I completely agree with that. I think also that there is kind of two sides to it, though. I think I have, before I've worked with clients, sometimes I have come into a lot of meetings, and I think you've got to understand what is the value of this client. Like Madeleine said before, this is going to be a huge project that could be, you know, really great for you. Sometimes bite the bullet and just do those things for free, because actually, you know, you get yourself involved. They're also more inclined to work with you once you've had those calls and you've had those meetings, because you've already started working together. So, you know, you've got to, you really do have to, you know, make it up in your mind whether it's worth doing or not. But I do completely agree, set boundaries, because everyone is always going to try and take the mick with freelancers, because they will. That's just human nature, try and get a bargain. So, you know, set ground rules. You've got to, as hard as it is, you've got to be strong and be quite strong in your position to say, actually, yeah, I'm happy to have that call. Either you say, you know, I'm happy to have that call. Usually I would charge for that because, you know, this is my time. But for this instance, we'll get, you know, I'll do it for free. Next time, I'm going to have to include that in our invoice, you know. Or, you know, you set the boundary before that and say, yeah, once we've set the contract up and we've established how we're working together, we can set that call up, you know, and move it to the time when you've actually signed the contract and it's ready to go. So kind of, you've got to think of it as by situation and kind of how you feel about what this client could be for you.
Absolutely. So moving on to chasing clients, we've had a couple of questions actually in on this as well. So sometimes people write those proposals, they spend the time, and then it goes into this black hole and you don't hear anything again. So, you know, obviously you want to be pushy to a certain degree because you've done this work and you want to close it. But then also you've got to be mindful that you don't want to annoy your potential future client. Emma, have you got any advice in terms of chasing clients? What do you do? I mean, you obviously act a bit more as an in-between person for the freelancer and the client. Any advice that you can offer?
Yeah, I think, you know, as you said, it can be hard to know sometimes. And, you know, we've all been there, whether it's, you know, with being a freelancer or, you know, or a client trying to chase freelancers. Sometimes, you know, we've all kind of been in that situation, and, you know, it's how long do you wait, etc. And I think first off, you have to, you know, remember again that they are another human and people get busy, and, you know, you don't want to be sending 25 emails in the same day, but at the same time, as you said, don't leave it 2 weeks, because, you know, things do move so quickly. So, I mean, I suppose it's where using a platform like the Work Crowd, I can help, because that's something that I can do. And I think that helps to kind of take the awkwardness out potentially for the freelancer that might think, oh gosh, I'm going to be working with this person and I don't want to ruin the working relationship before it's even started. So I think that's something that that you should consider as being helpful using a platform. But only the other day I had a freelancer call and say, oh gosh, I was having a really good conversation and it seems to have just absolutely disappeared. And all it took was a 30-second call to the client, just a nudge from me, and they were like, oh my goodness, it's been on the top of my list for days, as that happens. So I think it is difficult, but I'd also say, try some kind of different approaches as well. I think it can be difficult to know if people are checking their inboxes and how much that's happening. So sometimes if it's been a little while, connect with them on LinkedIn, send them a little message on LinkedIn and say, I know we're in conversation, you must be busy. And I think also asking potentially if there's another contact that it might be easier for you to go through once you've been through the first few stages. There might be someone within the HR or hiring department that they can then pick up the moving forward with the contracting and things like that people sometimes forget can take up quite a lot of time.
Absolutely. Mel, do you have any top tips as a freelancer chasing for clients and closing them?
Yeah, I think Emma's right. Like, it is a really hard thing to do as a freelancer. I think there's got to be a limit where you're at in terms of you don't want to nag, because you are potentially going to work with this person. And that is where platforms do really help, because it does take it out. And that's something I've found with the Work Crowd particularly. But I think as a freelancer on your own as well, you just have to have a limit. Like, if they're not responding to you after so many emails, maybe they're not interested anymore. And that is, again, the nature of working with someone as a business, you being the business yourself, is some people just change their minds. And I think, be proactive in chasing a couple of times, because you also want to show you're interested. You don't want to just give them a proposal and they never speak back, because they'll be like, well, actually, maybe they didn't care that much either because I haven't heard from them. But you give I would always give maybe a 1 or 2 nudges, and then that's kind of it. And then I would leave it down to them. If I don't hear from them, you don't hear from them, because, there'll be a reason why not. And I think that's kind of, you just got to take it with a pinch of salt what they're doing. But definitely platforms can help with that. It takes the nagging away from you, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Mel that, unfortunately, sometimes you just have to say, okay, this hasn't worked out, and put it to one side and move on and look forward. I think in terms of to help sort of try and mitigate things or reduce the amount of chasing that you have to do, actually at the start, if you're going to invest your time in putting a pitch proposal, ask the client, what are their time frames? When are they looking to hire that person by? Okay, great. So you're submitting the pitch proposal. When do they need it by? When are they planning to review it? And when can they give you feedback? And you can explain to them that actually you're trying to manage your diary, you're really keen to work with them. And likewise, you just want to understand what their timeframes are so that you can coordinate it with other clients. So you can likewise show them the benefit of why you're needing these questions, but that helps put a framework in place that enables you then to follow up from.
Great. I've got a couple more different types of questions coming through, so I'm going to sort of quick fire them a little bit. Collaboration. We've been asked about collaboration. How to collaborate with freelancers? What does that look like? Madeleine, do you want to take that question?
So I can talk about it very much within the context of the Work Crowd. So what we've seen is actually increasingly we have freelance members who have likewise become client members. So quite often it might be a sort of slightly more senior person who's very good at going out and pitching and winning work, but wants to work with someone perhaps more junior, or someone who likewise has other skill sets. So let's say I'm a marketing person, but actually I find out my client requires PR skills, social media skills. Actually, the client quite often wants to feel like it's all part of the same loop. So there is an opportunity for you as that sort of key person to actually go and identify freelancers that you can work with. You may have people within your network that you can do so. So within the Work Crowd, we've had lots of freelancers that have likewise set up client accounts and have matched and connected with freelancers that can then support them with their client work. Now, obviously, if that's client work that's through the Work Crowd, we zero rate that. But that's a great opportunity. Going back to what I think Emma was talking about earlier, networking. You know, actually, when you're out and about, if you think about your industry and how your industry works and the type of skills that your clients are looking for, when you're out at industry events and you come across freelancers who are likewise in your space or who have got complementary skill sets, connect with them and stay in touch with them, because actually there may be opportunities in the future to collaborate.
Great, thank you. We've got two very different questions actually. One is on reputation mitigation. So a freelancer had a client who wrote some sort of derogatory tweet. It had repercussions. I think impacted on their Google reviews. How do you manage difficult clients who can potentially give you bad reviews? In this situation, the individual reached out to other loyal clients and asked them for good reviews to mitigate this disastrous one. You know, it does happen, and there are, you know, obviously Google reviews and things like that that people can easily write things on. Any tips to manage that? And then also another question, so the team wants to think around that. Any tips on managing money, negotiating day rates, costs, working through an umbrella company against a limited company, advice on personal cash flow? We'd also be very grateful. That's a huge question there. So maybe we'll go to the reputation one first, Madeleine. Do you want to give any advice on sort of getting good reviews?
So unfortunately, you're always going to get some bad eggs, or you're going to get someone who doesn't like the service that you've provided. But I think in the case that you illustrated, what that individual did was probably the right thing. That, you know, if actually overall you do an amazing job, or this was a bit of an unfair review, and you have lots of clients who've got wonderful things to say about you, well, ask them to review you, get those reviews. And I think we've all had enough experience that we can see that sometimes there's a sort of, if you look at a Google review, or you can get an unfair review, and really you've got to look at things in the round. So I think in this instance, yeah, I would say yes, what you did was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think there's always going to be there may always be someone who doesn't agree with the way you work or work differently. I think with the terms of the reviews, just as some reassurance, I think, think about when you go to a restaurant, if you see one-off bad review, you kind of ignore it. You don't automatically believe it. You understand situation and circumstances. But I also think just taking a step back and remembering, as a freelancer, always trust your gut with who you work with. Like, I have turned down work because I got the wrong feeling from people who I was potentially going to work with. And I realized that maybe how I worked wasn't going to be in line with how they wanted me to work. And you have to really sometimes even just taking, biting the bullet and just realizing that actually it's not worth that income, because this is going to cause your life hell, is really trying to think about that and always trust your gut when you start working. And that's the wonderful thing about being a freelancer, is you can choose who you work with. And sometimes turning down projects is the best thing to do in those situations.
Yeah. And reviews better by email, Google, LinkedIn? Where would you recommend people put reviews? Is it best to get the email and then you can distribute them out wherever you want to? Yeah,
and I actually don't have anywhere that people could leave reviews that I couldn't control. I mean, that's often maybe a bit more if you're kind of showing yourself as a company. Maybe you've kind of branded yourself as an agency or something, and maybe that's where the Google reviews come in. Sometimes maybe just don't do that. And actually, I often get testimonies from clients after projects, and I'll put testimonies on my website as quotes with who it was and and how I work and what they've said about how we work together. It does just kind of take away that risk of someone who wasn't happy with maybe just the way you worked, or even sometimes if you're just too busy to take on work and you didn't respond to them, that can actually annoy people, and people often only review when they're annoyed about things you just even think about it in life. So maybe also thinking about where you're giving those opportunities for people to leave reviews, and maybe it's better to have that control yourself, and you have a website where you can put testimonials so people can read what people have said about you, but you've actually got the control.
Good idea.
Just answering Chris's question very quickly, but so one, when you're thinking about your structure as a freelancer, obviously
the question is on managing money and costs.
Yeah, the earlier one that Alice had flagged. So one, I think it's, as a freelancer, you've got to make a decision in terms of, do you want to set up as a sole trader? Do you want to work with an umbrella company? Do you want to work as a limited company? And what I would say is, look at the pros and cons of each. Generally, an umbrella company can be a great solution if you are, for example, between permanent jobs, and it's a short-term solution, and you just quickly want someone to, another company to look after all the finances for you. As a sole trader stroke limited company, then again, an accountant would be best placed to advise. But generally with a limited company, you need to very much see yourself as a business. So you need to be investing in your marketing. You need to be members of places like the Work Crowd, because actually you need to be able to substitute yourself as a limited company if you're unable to perform those duties. You can have more tax efficiency, but again, I think this is something that you'd have a chat with an accountant with. And I think going back to negotiating on rates, in some respects it goes back to what we talked about before. Understand your customers' pain points, provide a solution, and really position your pricing accordingly.
Just a note on that is, obviously, if you are wondering about rates, there is, on the Work Crowd does have a freelancer day rate guide. So if you're completely unsure, just go and download that, and you can see exactly what the average, and we've pulled that against all the freelancers who work across the Work Crowd and the average across them. So if you're kind of unsure about where to start, that's a really good place to kind of see, actually, in the industry, in the job role, you're looking at what is average day rate, because sometimes it's quite surprising to think you're probably undercharging, underrating yourself a lot of the time. But think what you're comfortable to work with, and don't undersell yourself. Like, if you really can show people in your pitch, in your proposal, your own worth, then actually you should be able to sell yourself and send and get the rate that you need. And if the company doesn't see that, then you shouldn't work with them.
Yes. So just on the last sort of few minutes that we've got, one question is, someone's got lots of experience across multiple different industry sectors and struggle to pick a specific specialism. Is that a concern? Any advice? Will it put clients off if they're seen as generalists rather than specialists? Prioritization of the pitching process. Any tips when it comes to doing that? And then, would you always draw up a contract with a client, or does this put them off? Madeleine, do you want to start with the first one, perhaps, in terms of specialization versus generalism? Just really quickly, top line thoughts.
So top line thoughts is, think about actually your core services within those industry sectors. There may be some commonality in terms of, are those clients typically B2B, or are they typically consumer or corporate, whether it is across various different industries. So I think if you think more about your transferable skills, then that's fine. And put together, then actually, if you have a client that's specifically looking for industry experience, great. Just make sure you have all those case studies in your mind in terms of what you've done within those specific industry experience.
Great, thank you. Prioritization of the pitching process, Mel, perhaps you can help with that. Any recommendations to prioritize clients when you're pitching for them?
I think I kind of touched on it. We touched on it a little bit earlier. I guess it's, again, prioritizing who you kind of want to work with as a client, what projects are going to be more worthwhile, having those starter conversations to see which projects are coming up first, what are the timescales. It could be that one client's put it out, but actually they don't want someone for 3 months, so don't prioritize those. So it's really, you've got to those initial conversations, talking to potential clients, finding out what it is they're after, as Madeleine discussed before, really getting down to what they want, when they want it, and how they want to work together. Understanding that first should really start to help you organize who you want to go for and how you're going to go for them, in what order or what it is. I mean, if you've got lots of clients to go for, then great, that's a really good position to be in. So yeah, you want to go with, and I think in terms of actually working with those clients, again, you only take on board what you can do, because you don't want to take on too much and then underperform across everyone. Take on a few projects that you can do really well, that might have a better prospect as well. Work with them, and then maybe you can reach back out to those people who you decided not to work with and say, actually, got a bit of time now, if you still want someone, I'm here.
It's great advice. And Emma, what's your thoughts on always having a contract with a client, or do you think it'll put them off?
Definitely always have a contract. I think having this, sorted from the start and being on exactly the same page, both of you, just helps with everything really that we've discussed, throughout the whole webinar. You have to be on the same page, you have to have things signed, and that will, help you to win future work, in terms of you can say, this is what you asked me to do, and, I did it, and here's the proof that I've done it. And obviously, it ensures that you get paid, and etc. And I think, as Mel's kind of mentioned a couple of times, if a client gets put off writing a contract up with you, then probably don't want to work with them particularly. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And
absolutely.
If I can just add to that, is that, so here at the Work Crowd, we have 2 different types of contracts that we use. So actually, if we've got a client who from the outset, it's quite clear, it's actually quite a sizable long-term piece of work, then we have a contract that reflects that. Where it is a relatively short piece of work, I suppose pertaining to what the one of our audience has said, would it put the client off? Sometimes clients can, if it's a sort of big 20-page contract, they go, whoa, that, but the work that I want to get done, that's a bit chunky. So in that sort of situation, we have a pared down one. We call it a statement of work. What it defines is, what you're going to do, what you're going to be paid, when you're going to be paid, who are the contracting parties, how you're going to communicate, and when. So, for example, we have lots of clients, and I think communication is key. So, are you going to communicate via email? Are you going to load, if you have reports that you need, where are you going to put whatever it is that you're going to be delivering? Are you going to have weekly meetings? So it just addresses very briefly those key elements so that everyone is on the same page. And just going back to what Emma said, both parties do sign and agree to it, so you have that commitment piece in place.
Absolutely. Well, Madeleine, Mel and Emma, thank you so much indeed for joining me this afternoon. And thank you to all the audience who've had loads of questions, which has been fantastic, and some lovely comments at the end. So thank you for those as well. I've really enjoyed hosting this event. It's great to be part of National Freelancers Day, which just kicks off tomorrow. So we're the sort of the pre-event for it. And also, it's just fantastic to be representing such a brilliant community of individuals. The Work Crowd is all for freelancing. It's following that journey. There's some incredible stats out there. McKinsey said by 2027, 50% of the workforce will be working independently. This is going to be the biggest workforce globally. So being able to advise and help and support is absolutely our mission. Thank you so much. Do sign up to the Work Crowd if you're not part of the community, and do come to more of our events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.